Hello and welcome to the Books on Asia podcast, sponsored by Stonebridge Press, publisher of fine books on Asia for over 30 years, located at www.stonebridge.com. And I'm your host, Amy Chavez. Today we have joining us from Hawaii, John Stevens. He is Professor Emeritus of Tohoku Fukushi University in Sendai, Japan, and he is the author and translator of over 20 books on Buddhism, Zen, Aikido, and Asian culture. He has practiced and taught Aikido all over the world. And today we're going to talk about John Stevens' long publishing career, including his poetry translations and some of his many other books. So, welcome, John.
Aloha, everyone. This is John Stevens from Hawaii. After spending 35 years in Japan, I moved here.
Just wanted to let you know that I'm such a huge fan of yours, and I'm so glad to have you on the podcast and to finally meet you. You sent me a long list of publications, just actually a fraction of what you have published. But on this list alone, I've read 5 of them, and I'm just going to read off the titles to give people an idea of some of the books that you've written. I'm sure many of our listeners will have read some of your books as well. The Marathon Monks of Mount Hiei, The Essence of Aikido, Spiritual Teachings of Morihei Ueshiba. And then the next are your poetry translations. One Robe, One Bowl, the Zen Poetry of Ryokan. Dewdrops on a Lotus Leaf, Zen Poems of Ryokan. And then Mountain Tasting, Haiku and Journals of Santoka Taneda, which I'm currently using now because I'm doing some research on the wandering poets of the Shikoku pilgrimage.
Yeah, well, the first book I ever wrote was One Robe, One Bowl. I got to Japan and I was in love with Ryokan, and I thought, well, let me try my hand at translation. And then I sent it to Weatherhill and it was accepted. So the first book I ever wrote went straight to publication. So I've never had a problem publishing things. And
that's a great book. I know. I've recommended it to lots of people.
And it was kind of like a hippie favorite for a while. And a lot of people kept it in their backpack when they travel in Japan. But the whole thing for me has been that I translate ideas and feeling and sentiment, not the words. So a translation has to be good literature, fine literature, And I don't know, Arthur Waley at all?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, well, his poem translations are so good. I mean, they're probably better than the originals in a lot of ways. So easy to read and enjoyable. And that's always been my goal, is to not translate the words so much as the entire body of work, look at it and then what it was like, how would I say this? How would Ryokan, whoever it is, would say this in English? Good English. So it's not a one-to-one translation at all. And, Japanese language is a lot of repetition, and some things, it doesn't have a beginning, middle, and end in sentences. Sometimes the end is the beginning. It's all mixed up.
Now, I have one of your translations right here from Dewdrops on a Lotus Leaf.
Oh, yeah.
I was wondering if I could read one of the poems so that people can get an idea of what you had just said about translating the feeling.
Yeah.
And this is, I believe, what would be Ryokan's death poem.
Yeah.
He says, "My legacy, what will it be? Flowers in spring, the cuckoo in summer, and the crimson maples of autumn."
I'm going to cry.
Yeah, it's a lovely haiku. You really get that feeling across.
I cry when I do these translations. And when I do a biography sometime, I get so upset when the person dies, because you're so close to them. You can't be objective at all. And then Buddhism 101 is that nothing's objective. It's all subjective. So if you don't feel that the passion or the poignancy, then it's not a translation. Especially academic, put footnotes and explain I hate, brackets and put the Japanese word in. So it's the gestalt, the whole poem. And then most of the time, it comes to me. I don't have to rewrite very much. The poetry, the prose books, I have to rewrite a lot. poetry is my great love.
You started off with One Robe, One Bowl. And then from there, where did that lead to? And how did you launch this fantastic career of writing books?
The second one was Santoka. So the first two books were the first two books I wrote. And, Weatherhill was still around then. It's the Weatherhill. And so they kind of flowed together as two different styles, but, wandering poets. It just appealed to me. Well, so after I did the first two books of poetry, then I was in Sendai, and there was a wonderful Aikido teacher, Shirata Sensei in Yamagata. So I met him, and he was one of the great masters of the 20th century. He was the direct disciple of the founder, and he was in his 60s when I knew him. I was a very impressive guy, a wonderful guy. But he was in Yamagata, and nobody was there. So I would go see him as much as I could. It was about an hour train ride from Sendai to Yamagata. And I'd go there early, and I would go to the dojo, and there was nobody there. He was there. He was never not there. He was always there, and he was sitting, meditating. I said, this guy's really great. And I learned something. When you're a teacher, you got to be there all the time. Anyway, I thought he's great. He has so much to say. So let me do a book about him. And that was the third book, I think, first book from Shambhala, the first Aikido book. And because of his inspiration, it got into the other Aikido books and the other martial art books. So that's the one block of my work is from him, his inspiration. And it was, you get a lot of debts to pay in your life. You pay the debt to your teacher. And, so I had some time in my life, and my writing was an extension of my practice. So it's what I learned and what I heard. There's a very strong oral tradition in Japan, The most important things cannot be written down. I got that, just it's the atmosphere and the sound of his voice and, what's going on. So people would go to Japan to study, like getting there and, the sounds and the weather, the Japanese smells and the people and how things are happening, the changes of seasons and all that. That's also in the poetry, that you can, like Crimson Leaves, you really can understand how beautiful it can be, whatever it was before. You can see it on YouTube.
Right.
And it completely destroys the experience, I'm from the Midwest, so we have Crimson Leaves as well, but it's not like Japan. It's a different sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Of all of your books, what are you most known for? Would that be your Aikido books, your Budo books?
Yeah, Budo books, mostly. And because then I started writing all these biographies, and same sort of thing. I saw it as my practice, and when you study about somebody, you learn. And then I was a professor, and I wanted to share that. The whole idea of being a professor or a teacher is learning things and then sharing it with people. And writing a book should be enlightening, both for you, of course, and for the people who are reading it. I did what Teshu and Kano Sensei and Awa Sensei, those people from all the modern martial arts. One thing, Kano Sensei, my estimation rose so much when I was working on the book. This guy was really a great guy. And what he did for modern Japan. And I was a Teshu fan at first, but I said, well, I did a book about those people, so I should do something about Kano Sensei. And then I was saying, boy, this guy was really something. And, it made me sad as he died on the ship on the way back from Seattle to Japan. He didn't have a single person with him. No disciples, no anybody. So there's a lot of sadness there. I think you really have to be in love with your subject.
And what's your favorite book of all the ones you've written? What did you enjoy most writing?
One Robe, One Bowl, the first one, and that's the best one. I thought that was really work for. And The Art of Peace, that little paperback I wrote?
The Art of Peace.
It's a pocket book. Yeah, that's been a bestseller. I mean, real bestseller.
Oh, good.
That was same thing. I was thinking if Morihei was talking English, how would he say this? And the way, it's a little excerpts, but I like that, It just was what he said. A lot of it was what I heard. And so then I just put it together in a flow. And that's read by non-martial art people also. Mm-hmm. Read by a real right section of the reading public. And also, 20 languages, 25 languages maybe. And many, many times I've been, riding a bus and somebody's reading it. whereas my other places. So one book, The Essence of Aikido. It's The Essence of Aikido, the spiritual teachings of the founder of Aikido. And I went to talk to Kishomaru Toshu. That was the son of the founder. And I said, well, I'd like to do a book about the spiritual part of Aikido. A lot of esoteric stuff in it. And the son said, nah, nobody's interested in that. And, it was a hard act to follow because his father would go and he was from a different planet kind of thing, doing all these flights of fancy or talking, and nobody could understand it. So in modern Aikido, that was left out mostly. It just was too complicated. That was his thought. And I said, gee, well, foreigners are kind of interested in that. Please let me try. And then, so I finished it. And the editor brought it to him, and he looked through it and said, this Stevens guy is really strange, just like my father. That was the greatest compliment. And Kodansha was a wonderful company, these beautiful books. And, remember them? They were so wonderful. And Kodansha was founded by Noma, who was a disciple of the founder of Aikido. He said, I'm going to do these really beautiful books about Japan. I don't care what it costs. Because I think Kodansha made, how big they are. They made most of them out of comic books, probably. So, and they always lost. I did maybe 10 books from Kodansha, and then they folded. I had maybe 3 books under contract, and then I got a call. The editor on the next day said, sorry, we're out of business. So they never made money, but it was a great service to publishing in the world. I'm very proud of those books, the Kodansha books. On the content. Weatherhill, too, was my other publisher, which is wonderful. But they also went out of business.
But you can still find a lot of your books in the libraries, which is great. And those do tend to be Kodansha, Weatherhill. The Shambhala ones I usually have to order for the library.
Yeah. So the founder of Shambhala, Sam Berkles, was a good friend of mine. And so I kind of worked with Shambhala from the beginning when I first started. So we did a lot of books together. And it was just like we're friends, still friends. They publish anything I wrote. They're good. They're popular books, So
Shambhala would be Dewdrops on a Lotus Leaf, The Art of Peace, Invincible Warrior, The Sword of No Sword, Zenbo, Zen Arrow Life and Teachings of Awa Kenzo, The Way of Judo, and Lust for Enlightenment. That's a lot of books for one publisher.
Lust for Enlightenment, that's my favorite. But
is it? Tell me more about it. It has a very intriguing title.
It's very controversial, though. And the minister of Sri Lanka called up and complained about it. He said it was obscene. He said, well, it's the truth. Everything I said was from scriptures and other things, especially iconography. Because there's a big difference between what's written in sutras and what you see in temples and things like that. So you have to study the images first. That's really where it is, So I've always been a big fan of actually looking at art and looking at the faces. And the other one that was a stone bridge was the Secret Sex Teachings of Buddha. The
Secret Sex Teachings of Buddha. And that was through Stonebridge Press.
Stonebridge, yeah. And that's another funny story is that I was in the hospital for a year, so I had nothing to do. So I wrote this novel. It's only like 100 pages long. I should have written a lot more, but I didn't want to because I wrote it in the hospital, and when it stopped, it stopped. Beautiful design, Stonebridge Bridge. Beautiful books. There's one thing you shouldn't mention is Marathon Monks. It's also one of my all-time favorite books.
I really like the expose of how they did their training and everything.
It's amazing. I mean, it's just. And they're such wonderful guys. That's been reprinted by Echo Point Press, but it's like books on demand, which means photocopy, right? And the original photographs are so wonderful.
They are.
And it's a photocopy of books. At least they put it back in print, but I don't know whether Shambhala didn't republish it because it sold out immediately.
It was a cult classic among runners, which is how I found out about it. I used to be a long distance runner, so I was interested in running that route. And I've had lots of people contact me about the route as well. And I have shared, the route with them. And because it is quite open. And if you're going to Mount Hiei anyway, and you're a runner, you may as well. Just don't make the mistake I did. Be sure to run in long pants. It was a really hot day and I had shorts on, and you really shouldn't be doing that on a religious route.
But it was the kind of one and done, because now there've been new guys coming down the road and stuff, which I don't have any contact with them, but it was done and finished, and I was really happy with that.
Have you thought of writing a memoir?
Well, I'm going to have to do it soon. First of all, I said it's not going to happen. I'm not going to write my memoirs. But recently I thought, well, it's not about me. It would be about all the people I knew and I, trained with and studied with, which is pretty interesting.
That would be interesting. Kind of like perhaps something like Donald Ritchie's Portraits of People.
Yes. So I love Donald Ritchie too. That was my favorite Japanese writer. Great guy. But I met him, and then we did. So my students said, well, like we're doing now, talking. I can't write anymore, so talk. I guess you can talk and then actually can record it, right? But it won't be an autobiography or anything like that. And then the other big thing was art exhibitions. I started in maybe the 1980s, Zen art, and then first one was in New Orleans, and then I traveled to Los Angeles and Boston and several other venues, and I did Zen art exhibitions in Berlin, Brussels, Australia, all over the place. And those are big hits. So organizing the exhibition and then doing the catalogs. So I just did one in Barcelona, and that's coming out soon. The exhibition was in a 12th century monastery.
This is Rengetsu, the Buddhist nun, right?
Rengetsu was a 19th century poet, calligrapher, artist, a martial artist too. She's trained in the castle, samurai training as a young lady, and a real kick-ass. And then married, lost her first husband. All her kids died, and then the second husband, they were in love, but he died of tuberculosis, and the kids all died. Then her father died. So age 42, she was alone. And she couldn't stay in the monastery. So what was she going to do? Made pottery that everybody could afford. So it was really, really inspiring story. Another thing I like is that people will often cry when looking at a Zen painting or looking at Rengetsu's stuff. And often, almost every exhibition I've been to, sometimes I'd stay in the exhibition hall and just watch people go by and watch the reactions. It has a transformative effect. So that's another reason why I like exhibitions so much. And books too, right?
And what was your part in the exhibition? Can you explain like some of the steps you had to go through to put this together?
First of all, they get a contact from the museum director and the curator saying we want to do this exhibition. It's a Poor Clare monastery, meaning Order of Poor Clares, ladies, women. And we're going to do a cathedral was restored. And then one part was they built a museum within it, which I thought was great. And they wanted to showcase female artists from all over the world, which also is nice. And nuns, mostly like that. And they said, well, let's do a book about Ryokan.
This is Rengetsu, the Buddhist nun, right?
Yeah. She was married twice and lost all her kids, lost everything. 42, she had nothing. And then she made pottery to support herself. Beautiful, tea bowls and teapots and all kinds of other things. And they contacted me. I said, yeah, sure, let's do it. A tremendous amount of work and going back and forth. And they built a whole new exhibition hall for it. 50 people worked on it. The carpenters and the designers. And they did such a wonderful, because they all were in love with it.
So on this one, how long did it take to put the exhibition together?
3 years. And then the collector had bought some new stuff. He said, put this in. I said, we're done. We can't put it in. But they did. They found a space. And often collectors have their own demands as well. So you have the curator, you have the director, you have the designers, and also the technicians are also very proud of their work. And it's really hard to mess with them. He said, no, too much light. And he said, no, and they argue about that. It's 5 centimeters too high. No, it's got to be lower. Sometimes the best ones I've worked at is the technicians fell in love with artwork, which I thought was wonderful. These guys are carpenters or whatever. And then say, boy, this is pretty good. So that had an effect on them. It's long. It's on until the 27th of May. But it's in the middle of COVID, and people, 20 20 or 30,000 people came during the COVID period, which is amazing.
So you just said it's on until May, and that's in Barcelona.
Barcelona, yeah.
And where's the venue?
It's a monastery, Pedralbes. That's the name of the monastery.
Okay, great. So if any of our listeners are in Spain, can make it to Barcelona to see John's exhibition, I'm sure they'd be thrilled.
That's another thing. As a translator, you should make that come through. That feeling that.
Okay, and let me ask you about other books. At the end of the podcast, I always ask our authors what are their favorite books on Japan. So maybe you could share with us what you have really enjoyed, or some books that have influenced you, or that you've come back to again and again.
You know R.H. Blythe, right? Of course.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the first book I read in high school was haiku books. His haiku books. This is from Shambhala, and the Poetry and Zen is still
Poetry and Zen. Okay.
Letters and Uncollected Writings of R.H. Blythe. So also I wrote a blurb for this, saying the first book I read in high school was haiku books.
Really? Great.
And then my dad was a stockbroker, and my parents didn't like Japan because of the war, and how on earth does this high school kid in Evanston, Illinois get interested in Japan? I fell in love with Japan. I wanted to go. And I went. And I went for 6 months, and I stayed 35 years. And I still read them, the haiku books, still. And the other one I liked was Zen and Japanese Culture by Suzuki, D. Suzuki. That beautiful Boligan edition. Such a beautiful book. The Unknown Craftsman, I really enjoyed that and still read it often. The next book is The Art of Budo, Painting and Calligraphy by Japanese Masters. It's coming out from Shambhala. It's astounding. I do say so myself. And it's kind of my swan song.
Oh, great. Oh, I look forward to reading that. Excellent.
Like it. It's really done well.
And when will that come out?
It's scheduled for Christmas time. Like that kind of book is... It's a gift book, so, but it's not, I'm in the second pass of proofs now, so it's getting sort of moving along. And then the Rengasa catalog will be done this year. And then it's my memoirs, I guess.
There you go. So thank you for joining us, John. It has been a true honor to have you on the podcast and to be able to talk to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Aloha.
You've been listening to the Books on Asia podcast, produced and edited by Michael Palmer. Logo by Alex Kerr. Sponsored by Stonebridge Press, publisher of fine books on Asia for over 30 years. They can be found at www.stonebridge.com. Check out their upcoming release, Just Enough, Lessons from Japan for Sustainable Living, Architecture, and Design by Asby Brown. For more interviews, book reviews, and other features, visit the Books on Asia website at booksonasia.net.